Hello, you're watching Startup Booster, an online guide that will help you to create and develop a successful startup. This video course was created by InnMind.com, global platform for startups and investors. InnMind connects professionals in the sphere of innovations, supports startups to find investors, mentors, and experts, provides with instruments and resources for growth and development of business, and supports investors with expertise and due diligence. My name is Katerina. I'm co-founder of InnMind.com. And today we are going to speak about such a relevant and popular topic these days about ICO. We have as a speaker today Soren Fog, who is co-founder of Crypto Valley in Switzerland, serial entrepreneur. And Crypto Valley is the blockchain and cryptographic technology ecosystem. Hello, Soren.
Hi there, nice to meet you all. So what do you want to know?
So we have quite a bunch of questions to you today. As I already mentioned, this topic of ICO is getting really popular these days. Lots of questions come to us at InnMind. Lots of startups are asking, what is that? How to do that? They want to learn a bit more. Could you explain what is ICO?
Well, it stands for Initial Coin Offering, and some people also call it TGE if you come across that abbreviation. Means token generating event, which is a little more accurate. It's basically an event where you offer people to buy in to some idea with their money. It's a crowdfunding sort of thing where you can monetize by selling not shares but vouchers. And let me explain. It's about a proposition, a value proposition of some idea. How do you attract your stakeholders? Let's take an example where we could look at a game. People play online games. This is just a simple example, and some people spend a lot of time in these games, and after spending all that time they might obtain some items, some sword to kill a dragon with, or what do I know, and this can have a value. So if you create a token-based economy for game items and you want to make an ICO on that, so people could basically buy some of the tokens, and then they could use those tokens to buy items in the game, and they can make money from selling items in the game, and they can exchange these tokens back to whatever currency they want. So you would try to add some values, some proposition into this token, this coin, if you wish, and attract stakeholders. Here would be other gamers. It could also be people who make the games. So when you do the ICO, the initial coin offering, you would then propose to the community that you have this idea. You may not have made it yet. You may only have a white paper and a landing page and a web page and a few people who says they can do it. Some basic due diligence, but not very much. And people would then buy the tokens, hold them while you develop it, speculate it. Even the game providers might be big investors in this particular idea I'm using as example, to buy a whole lot of them and basically fund your idea, so you can start this without parting equity. And once it's running, people who owns the coin can then use them to buy stuff, but the value of the coin could also be speculated in, so it itself can gain or lose value according to some other reference currency. So that's the explanation of an ICO as I see it.
Can we compare it with IPO? Lots of people compare it with digital IPO. Let's say they are calling that ICOs, digital version. Is it true? Is it correct?
I would say no. An IPO is when you sell out stock or equity. An ICO is not equity. So, but it could be. I mean, you could create an ICO that is where the coin is connected to equity. but we're talking a different paradigm here. We're talking a much more flexible system, and because it can do both, and because it's so easy to do it with non-equity, where you basically sell vouchers, this creates a new space for investment, basically. And I believe that, yeah, we will not see IPOs go away, but I believe this ICO hype we might see at the moment, where a lot of people are making a lot of money for very little ideas. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but I think we will see sort of a curve. We have a hype situation now, and then we will probably see a fall where the regulators start being interested in this space and see how they can protect people from bad investments. Basically, that's their objectives. And we will then see a stabilizing, I believe, over the next year, where ICOs become a mainstream form of investing into not only fintech and IT, but a whole lot of other things.
Yes, and about the industry that you just started, lots of startups and lots of people in general, they think that the ICO is for a particular industry, for a particular type of startup. Is there any limitation for the stage of the startup that can do an ICO, for the industry of a startup that can do an ICO?
Well, yes, there is, and pretty much that's the imagination. So the answer is basically no. There is one constraint, and that is you need to, when you create a token, this item that is traded, this item that is sold on this digital encryption or protected element on a distributed ledger or blockchain, if you wish, you need to embed some features into this that somehow interest the people that will get the stakeholders on board, that creates a motivation or triggers motivation to use it. So if you look at that, I mean, for the game example again, it would motivate people to play games, or it would motivate game software developers to use this. But if you work in a cemetery and what you do is go around and make nice little plans, so it looks nice, I don't necessarily see how you can connect that with a value this way. So it depends on the case. And yes, when we look at digital information, digital space, and it doesn't have to be fintech, it doesn't have to be insurtech, it doesn't have to be the other many techs. It can be standard things, as I said, games. It's pretty much endless when you have digital. On my own startup, iprotus, we are focusing on supply chain, where we also see a lot of opportunities to both make the cost much less, but we can also basically enable smaller players in the third world to enter the market and provide services to the supply chain. So it has a whole lot of implications because of the digital aspect, but as soon as it gets manual, it gets a little difficult. Maybe I went a little astray there, but yeah, come on with the next question then.
Okay, thank you for the answer, but just my next small sub question, let's say, can a traditional business go for ICO? Can they do an ICO?
I don't see why not. They would have to find a way to define a token that has the right value proposition, that has the right incentivizing triggers for people to use it, and then yes.
Mm-hmm. And you have mentioned that there are already successful cases where companies could earn lots of money on ICO. Can you give some examples, if not giving the names, but just like examples, what they did, what kind of tokens they created? And
I'm also happy to give names. I mean, it's no more than 2.5 months ago when I made an event. I make a lot of events in Crypto Valley in Zug, Switzerland. And I had one where we had 3 small companies, new startups with young guys and no money, standing in front of an audience and pitching basically the idea shortly. And I remember two of them, Status and Fluon, I think. I can't remember how much they actually made, but when they were standing there basically with the white hanging out of the pockets, a few months later, they all reached, at least on average, over 100 million invested. So yes, it goes fast. These ideas were good ideas, were well conceived. The token incentivizing factors or triggers were clear. So I think that what might not have been bad investments. The idea is good, but we might also see on the market some people trying to scheme this because, well, when there's easy money around, there will be a lot of people trying to scam it. So if you are an investor who wants to invest in token generating events or ICOs, you need to be careful and you need to understand some of the technical part. You need to team up with people who understand this technology and understands this motivating factors, the value proposition of token, and you need to understand also some of the code behind, because these contracts, as we also heard, one of the successes that didn't become a very good success was an old idea with the DAO or DAO, Distributed Autonomous Organization, the first ICO, if I'm not mistaken. And some guy found a bug, way to abuse the contract to siphon away quite a large amount of money. And I also want to say, when we say contract, it's not a contract in a legal sense. A contract in a distributed ledger like Ethereum is a piece of software. It's a code, and you can write anything you want there. It's not adhering to legal language or lawyers or the profession of law. It is a contract in a digital sense. And I think the name may come from developers who, when they design an API or a protocol, a way to interact between two parties, they say that this particular interface is the contract of how we talk together. Yeah.
I think that's a topic of a separate interview that we'll make with you in the future about the process, how to make, and I feel how a startup can go through this, like describing all the steps, because I can see already there is lots of information that they should think about. But now speaking about ICO as a trend, do you think that there are challenges and difficulties for the industry, for the economy? Do you see that there might be, because of this scam and some not high quality projects, there might be some bubble created because of that?
Definitely. I mean, I think what we are looking at right now is a bubble under construction. And what we try to do from Crypto Valley is to understand how this works. We don't have a means to stop, or that's not our job description either. We are a neutral organization. But we try to understand this space. We try to help the regulators, the government, etc., understand the risks, and work with them on how to mitigate it, if we can preemptively mitigate it, so that we don't suddenly get a situation where the regulators comes in and just stops everything, which would be a shame, because the ideas are very good. As we all know from every new technology that comes on the market, let me just use the internet as an example. I was one of the first to build an internet service provider in my home country, Denmark. And back then, people warned me that if I was working with the internet, I most likely would end up in jail, because it was all pornography. And it was true. Most of it was pornography back then. But I saw an opportunity to use it for information exchange. And people didn't see that. There was even talk from political level that the internet should be forbidden. Luckily, it wasn't. And I think we see the same both risks, the same hesitation, the same situation where legislators that basically don't know what they're doing here. I think they may have learned from the internet, and this time they say, perhaps we have to let this play out a little and see where it goes. And this is what we specifically have in Zug, where I live. We have an unusually agile-minded regulator who sees an opportunity and don't want to just strangle it, but give it some leeway, a sandbox environment where we can operate with these new things and then learn together. So Crypto Valley is basically an idea, a vision about putting together all stakeholders, and we talked about regulators, government, of course, the ecosystem of startups, but also venture capital, who have to, startups need money, and we have media groups, we have marketing there, we have legal, yes, of course, very closely related, working together with some companies that try to understand how to form companies around these new things and what to understand the risks. The big corporates are also interested. We have some of the consulting, the big four consulting companies in the group, some of the big corporations, particularly in the IT space, banks, etc., participating in our organization. So everybody is there contributing in one or other way to try to understand this and develop this. And with that, we want to create a ecosystem, a thriving ecosystem in Zug, where we can mitigate the risk that you just asked about, and provide the sandbox, or provide an environment that can create growth and can help these startups thrive in a legal way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how long do you think will it take for the legislative system to adjust, to adapt, and to be fully, let's say, ready to meet this kind of demand for ICO?
That's a very funny question, because basically legislation is a living entity. You will never get around it, but you can get close. I don't know how long it takes. I think it will go faster in Switzerland because they are agile-minded, because they are interested, and because they have Crypto Valley to support them, and because there is an ecosystem that actually tries this out and tests all kinds of angles, also tests the limits. So we will learn here quicker than other places on the planet, I think.
And another question, just let's go a little bit more into detail about this ICO. We want to describe all the steps, but just for me to understand, can any person invest into project using this cryptocurrency? What are the limitations here to invest, let's say, from the side of the investor?
Well, you need to be able to buy the tokens. That's what you need to do. And typically that's done online using either Ether or Bitcoin. So you need Ether and Bitcoin. And to get Ether and Bitcoin, you need to find an exchange that would sell you those for fiat money or real money, or whatever people call them, banknotes. So you would need to have access to exchange your money into Bitcoin, and you would need, or Ether, and you would need to be able to access the internet to do the actual trades. And that, of course, when we look at the world today, limits quite a big part of the world. I mean, third world countries in Africa and other places have a very high percentage of the population have no access to banking. So still, I mean, access to ICOs is potentially everyone, but we need to have platforms out there. And the wonderful part about not ICOs, but the distributed ledgers that they run on, these blockchains, as people also call them, is that they can enable people out there to basically get banked, or to have other financial services that can be trusted because of blockchain technology. This is what blockchain technology does. It automates trust. So if you have digital information, you can store it in a blockchain, and you can trust it because people cannot change it. And suddenly you don't need this trusted entity like a notary service or bank or something else to be the intermediary. And that could enable third world countries to invest much more in ICOs. But more interesting, I think, the other way around, it could enable the third world or poor countries to actually to join this movement and be invested in. They might actually be the ones who benefit most from being able to do ICOs once they get connected, and their countries will get a boost from it. It would help create a better world, I think. It will help counter corruption to quite some extent. It's coming.
And once again, I briefly asked you about the challenges and about this bubble, but maybe you can see other, let's say, drawbacks or difficulties that might appear, or the problems, not maybe in this global sense in terms of the bubbles, but in some other senses. I don't know, for some startups who are not able to do that, for example, or for some entrepreneurs who are, well, as I could understand from your speech, that there would be no geographic limitation as long as there is access to those companies trading and exchanging the cryptocurrency. But maybe you can see some other problems appearing potentially.
I can see a whole range of them. I mean, one thing is just jurisdictions. Different countries have different rules. In some countries, you can go to jail for using Bitcoin. In other countries, you can like Switzerland, you can pay for services at the municipal office. So yes, suddenly you are limited in scope, or in geographic scope at least. That's one challenge. And when we talk about my own startup and the thing we're doing, it's a supply chain which is global. So where we would like to introduce a token-based economy, but there might be both black and white areas along this supply chain where we are not allowed to use this. So we need to use the old standard and then translate where we can. So black and white areas. I believe, however, that once we go a little into the future, 1-2 years, that some of these obstacles will fade away. That basically the various jurisdictions will see the usefulness of this technology because it drives down costs, it drives up transparency, provenance. Things like VAT would be easy to audit. You don't need to have an expensive apparatus to check and audit manually everything. You would know you have full provenance. So that would be a driver for jurisdictions to start jumping onto this technology. We just need to see the right initiatives coming. Just as I said with the internet before, it started with pornography. It ended up with everything else, which is extremely useful for the entire planet, that you can connect to the internet and get whatever information. I think the same will happen with blockchain technology. Distributed ledgers and ICOs is one of the drivers that enables people to use this.
Thank you, Soren. As we can see, we are now observing the entrance to the new, let's say, era, to the new technological period where all the borders will be changed, and probably very soon there will be no borders in terms of those financial operations. So this is great. This is awesome. I'm really looking forward to discussing with you in our next interview the steps, how to organize this all ICO, and I think all the startups will really appreciate this. And I hope that the information that we gave today, that Soren kindly shared with us, is helpful and opens the eyes of lots of startups, and not only startups, professionals, onto this topic. And we always at InnMind, we always invite to share your comments, to give your questions that we could further answer in our next interviews. Thank you, Soren, for joining us today at this interview.
Have a nice day. Yeah.
Thank you.